Noting that it's 7:02 p.m. on September 20th, 2023, I'll call the Board of Health meeting to order. And since we are doing this virtually via Zoom, we can go around and basically take attendance. So Daryl Beardsley present.
Matt Beavers present.
Julie Dreyfus present.
Rebecca Honeywell present.
Okay. So we have one scheduled item and then a number of items of business, but there are a few items to potentially add as they were not anticipated by the chair at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and we can decide whether we want to add this to the agenda. So right now there are two items, and so I'll just mention that these two possible agenda items are similar in that they're not really for substantive discussion, but rather I just wanted to alert the board to issues about which they might be questioned in the near term. And I thought it would be helpful for all members to know at least the context so that we limit any confusion that might happen between today and our next meeting when we might discuss it more extensively or not. So one is about Abbey Road well issues, 40B public versus private wells. That's more just the title of the thing that we received, not so much the issue to mention. And the other is about, we also received correspondence about Woodland Leland Farms optimal corrosion control treatment. It was also titled about recommendations and approval. So does anyone else have anything that they feel is urgent? Oh, okay.
I think the one thing I'll just say is that I was a little confused about some of the documents we got about these two. And so I think it's worth just clarifying what the issue is and then maybe deferring further discussion.
Yes, and that's how I felt when I read them. Same thing. I was concerned about confusion, so or ambiguity. So all right. So do we have a motion to add these items to the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl, aye. Okay, so the first one, we received a letter that was more comment directed to ZBA, but in it, it raised some issues about, or some well issues that were experienced at Abbey Road. And there was just a phrase in there that seemed to suggest it might be a current issue, but as I read it several times, it really is not something that the board is being asked to weigh in on. There seems to be no current pressing issue. So I just wanted to make that clear for the board. That was my reading. I don't know if anyone else had the same impression on reading it.
Yeah, I did. When I looked through it, I my first glance, I thought this was going to be about a current active issue, but it looked like it was referencing prior issues and then sort of a more general discussion about wells. So I think the key point is that it doesn't seem like there's an emergent issue at Abbey Road.
Right. And does anyone have any other questions about that? Okay, and then the other issue, the Woodhaven Leland Farms, we received a letter from Mass DEP. It was addressed to the town, but copied to the Board of Health. And it was talking about an optimal corrosion control treatment program for the combined Woodhaven Leland system. So one thing to know is that they are combining the systems, looks to make, and I think I saw Sean log in, but really this, the wells are not regulated by us. These are public water supply wells, and they've been looking at ways to do the treatment in an effective manner. I believe there's probably some economy of scale by combining them. But the title at the top of that talked about recommendations, but more from the DEP, and approval, but that's not us. So just wanted to make it clear that this does not fall under the jurisdiction of the Board of Health for this project. And the town,
Could you explain that a little further? Why does it not have to do with the Board of Health? It's not being built right now. It's already built. So I guess I'm confused why that wouldn't be the Board of Health.
because it's a public water supply regulated by Mass DEP, so they have the jurisdiction and authority over this, not us.
Oh, I understand they have jurisdiction. I'm asking you. So they're just informing us by giving us a copy of the letter.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
And that's part of what I just wanted to make clear, that the town has been actively engaged with the licensed operators who oversee the water supply systems at these at Woodhaven and at Leland Farms. And maybe there are others. Sean, do you want to weigh in, or Jeremy, on any little detail? I don't know if it's Whitewater or someone else who you've been working with this on, and it's not critical, but
I can. I was surprised it even made the agenda. The Board of Health just got copied on a notice. You get copied on notices all the time. We're in the midst of a long haul with DEP on-site engineering to design the new system and the combined system, which is pretty lengthy permit process. So
Right.
it was one correspondence of many that you just got. So
and we get lots of notices, and usually we get them. It doesn't always come so quickly before a meeting, and I just know that I and other members of the board get asked questions by people periodically, and to avoid having 2 weeks before our next meeting when we could discuss it again, thought it would be easier just to go over it and talk about what was being done and how it did not relate to anything about approval from our board. So that was the point of this. Not a big deal.
right.
But I do I want all members to be informed, because as chair, I see everything, but sometimes, or also I've been doing this for quite a while, but it's helpful rather than having someone ask you a question and not knowing what it's really all about.
Yeah, the agenda actually looks like the recommendations and approval coming from this board. So
That's exactly why we put it on the agenda, because it came to us saying recommendations and approval, and we wanted to make it clear to everybody that it's not us that's recommending and approving it.
it's not clear at all. It's clear as mud. You could have put
Yep.
DEP recommendations and approval, and it wouldn't have looked like it was coming from this board.
Sean, what's up here is the title of the document we got. And so the document we got came across as confusing because it came to us sounding like we needed to approve it. We put it on here because that's the document we got, and we want to tell everybody it's not us approving it. That's the point.
Can I just ask a question? The DEP regulates the public water supplies. And who is the primary entity within our town that communicates with DEP over drinking water? Is it not the Board of Health? Which division of our town would be involved with drinking water if it's not us?
It's not. It's through the town administrator's office and myself. So it would be Jeremy and myself who should have been notified that you were putting this on the agenda.
That's interesting, because what is your title? I'm sorry. I can't see who's speaking.
I'm the DPW director. I'm also the one that
Sean Collini runs the DPW. I think
Okay.
we're just putting this on here because we got an email that was confusing, and we don't want anybody to be confused and think we need to do anything. That's
On
literally
our
the
board.
point. That's literally the point of this agenda item.
Thank you.
I don't know how much more discussion we need on it.
Right.
exactly
Less
on.
is better.
So both of these agenda items did exactly opposite of the intended.
Yeah. And they
Not
were
for
put on here
members
because
of the
that was the
board.
title of the communications we received, which we thought was confusing, and we were trying to clarify that there's nothing active going on.
A
we need to
quick
act on.
email to the town administrator and the DPW director would have solved half of this from having to happen in a meeting.
Sean, I think the point here is we as a board can't talk to each other unless in an open meeting. And so we were doing this to tell the whole board that that's the situation.
It was an
We should have emailed you and
educational
said you don't need to
thing.
show up, but
I work
I
7
thought
days
the
a week,
discussion would have been over 7 minutes ago. So
and I wouldn't have had to come if you sent me an email. Could have clarified it pretty quickly.
sorry about that.
It wasn't a
Anyway, do we need any
clarification.
further discussion on this?
I think it's pretty
No,
clear.
I don't think so. Oh, sorry, Julie.
No, I think it's clear. I think we should say thank you. All set.
If I may, I have a question on the date for the finalization of this. The date seemed to be off by a year, if that could be clarified. Sean, do you know that offhand?
It's definitely off by a year, and we notified DEP that they probably need to fix that. That was a clerical error on their end.
Thank you.
Okay. Great.
All
So,
right.
Matt, I'll turn
sounds
over the
good.
meeting to
Let's-
you as vice chair.
Okay, so let's go. I saw the Ziskins here and Tom's here, so why don't we start, I think our first appointment's not for 17 minutes, so why don't we start with the Heritage? Tom, do you want to just give us an update to summarize what we've received since the last meeting?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. So I was able to conduct my follow-up inspection at the direction of the board on September 11th. I did specify on that report that we wanted a more detailed assessment from the environmental engineer, which we have since received. Should be in the documents. There were still some presence of moisture observed in the walk-in. It certainly looked cleaner as it had in the past, but there was still an area behind the equipment motor and the ceiling that needed to be cleaned. And then there was a piece of stainless baseboard that wasn't properly fastened to the base of the wall. And I was able to pull that back a little bit and observe some moisture. Did take some pictures that are up on the screen now of areas where presence of moisture had been previously, and just I think it's clarified a little bit in the environmental technician's letter that some of this may have been from previous leaks, and apparently there isn't a presence of moisture in the ceiling areas per that report. But I certainly did cite these issues on the inspection report, asking for repairs and remediation, and trying to make a tangible determination of where this moisture is coming from, and more importantly, to eliminate any and all presence of mold in the basement, particularly in areas where food is being stored, taking into account that there was mold found on food in previous inspections, and is documented and submitted into public record on photographs. As far as the letter goes from the engineer, I'm seeing there's recommendations to replace some contaminated materials, to relocate glassware storage, and other issues that Mr. Scott Herzog, the certified CIH, what does that stand for again?
Certified industrial hygienist.
Certified industrial hygienist, correct, is recommended on this report. So this is what we have to date. So hopefully Mr. Ziskin will take action on these line items and follow these recommendations to remediate the presence of mold, and then any structural concerns that are listed on here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the list of 4 action items you feel covers what you're still seeing is outstanding?
Me, Josh?
That was a question for Tom, I think.
Oh,
Yeah, it
sorry.
was a question for Tom, and then,
Okay.
sorry, Tom, should I repeat that?
Yes, so I think this does cover a lot of what was specified on my inspection report. It may be in the better interest to have a plumber look at some of the pipes to make sure that the leaks have been taken care of. I think there was a pipe with like a rag tied around it. One of the pictures, there was certainly some moisture that the board can certainly clearly see on some of the subfloor surfaces in the ceiling above the basement storage areas. I think some of the debris have been recommended to be removed on this report, but also on my report. So there was that package of ceiling tiles that had mold on them that was in an adjacent dry storage area off to the right of the walk-in freezer. And, you know, certainly surface repairs are recommended, as I've stated in the past, for the floors, walls, and ceilings of these walk-in refrigerators and freezer. You know, I think they're approaching the end of their useful life. They certainly do, as I said in the past, hold temperature, but as far as cleanability goes, it's starting to become a challenge. And when you add moisture to the mix, it's conducive to mildew and mold.
All right, so it sounds like there are items from your report. There are these 4 items that need to be addressed. There's some overlap there.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Two of the-
Rebecca, I see Rebecca's hand is up. Rebecca, did you have something you want to say?
I have a question. Does anyone know the age of the building for the heritage? I know the foundation, if it's an antique structure, which I think it might be. It might have a wet basement. Does it have a stone foundation? We have a house that was built in 1705, and we can't use our basement at all because it's wet, and it just every time it rains it gets soaked. And we've had this really wet weather, and I was wondering if that might be part of their problem, and if it might be solvable with some sort of a system that, you know, obviously an engineer would be able to address better than me. But I was curious because that might be part of their challenge, and I don't know how easy that solution is, but maybe I don't know. Does anyone know the answer? Does anyone know what the foundation is of that structure and how old it is?
I don't know, but I don't know that any of us are sort of engineers who've been there to evaluate it either. So I think speculation probably doesn't make a lot of sense. It's old. That's for sure.
No, I was just thinking maybe that's the direction we should suggest they go into, if that.
I mean, it sounds like sorry, you're breaking up. I can't tell if you're done. It sounds like they had an industrial hygienist come out and inspect and make specific recommendations about things, one of which was having a plumber come to sort of investigate the source of the standing water, which I think would probably address that. All right, so Josh, we'll come to you in a second, but I think before that, Tom, were there other issues we wanted to draw? I think we know we have the report from the insulation replacement, which looks like it happened. Is that this one? I think that was the other issue we had outstanding. It was the water in the basement and then replacement of the insulation in the attic, which looks as though it was completed.
Yes, that's been done. So it looks as though now we're at following the recommendations of the.
Yeah, and here's the invoice for that. So just to go back to our order letter. Is this the most recent one? This is from a while ago. Okay, so I think it sounds like the main issues are these 4 points that the engineer brought up. Josh, you want to comment on the plans for addressing those?
Sure. 2 of those have been taken care of already. The ceiling tiles which we knew of in miscommunication, but they're gone. The glassware is gone. We are planning on replacing and restoring the areas that the engineer recommended. We have figured out the water in the walk-in issue. We found out where it was coming from. It's lined up against our freezer. So what's happening is the condensation, the air from the freezer is coming into the walk-in and freezing and then melting. So our plan is to melt that block of ice and replace it with insulation on both sides to prevent any more ice cold air coming into the walk-in. And then the water issue on the other sides, Tom, is we had it's a glycol machine that does our beer lines. That was and I sent you guys a picture on that. So that's where the water was coming from there. And then so we had that replaced yesterday and today, or not, sorry, not replaced, repaired yesterday and today. So that should solve that problem. Some of the towel wrapped drain that you saw was to be able to prevent the water from going on, to repair the drip that was there, which we had done as well. I feel like we've made some great progress over the last couple weeks in getting everything addressed. We've been able to divert some of the water away from the building better to prevent water from coming in. It is a half stone and then a half poured concrete foundation. So we keep updating that and keep improving that and extending water away from the building, which has helped a lot. So we really feel like we're on the right path, and you guys have been a great help and guidance on this. Thank you.
So I think just to identify the outstanding issues. So of these four, it sounds like the glasses are moved, but the sort of affected gypsum board insulation needs to come out still.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the yeah, and the tiles are gone.
And the tiles are gone. And then similarly for the ice cream freezer, sort of cutting the wallboard and
Exactly. Yeah.
that still needs to happen.
Yeah, that needs to happen. That will happen next week. And I can document all that.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think if you could just sort of send us receipts for all that stuff, that would be probably, at least in my mind, would be helpful. I defer to the board whether they need anything else.
Also, Tom, I would imagine you're planning to go back out.
Yes, I'll wait to hear word from Josh on the finalization of all these other line items, and we'll schedule a revisit.
Yeah, if I think next week would be great. The end of next week, I think we should be able to do all that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Be in touch.
All right. Thank you. I will.
All right. We really appreciate the attention you paid to this. It sounds like good progress has been made. Thanks for staying in touch and keeping us up to date. I think
Of course.
we'll probably look, my guess is we'll probably just at least have this as an agenda item on the next meeting in 2 weeks to just sort of check in on progress.
Perfect.
Does that sound reasonable to others on the board?
Yes, sounds good.
All right. Get back to our agenda here if I can.
Do you want to do the other two food establishment permit applications so that Tom can then leave?
That's a great idea. Let's do that. Looks like we have Hot Smoke and Papalius Wood-Fired Pizza. Is that correct?
Yes, those are both events at Heritage, one being this weekend and then the following Saturday, this Saturday and then the following Saturday. So
Heritage or Wood?
Excuse me, Silverwood. And we're gonna retouch base with these operators to make sure that some of the things that we previously talked about, like access to hand washing and food protection and temperature control concerns are addressed, and the food is prepared and served in a safe way.
All right, and I assume you're recommending approval on both of these?
Yes, I recommend conditional approval with compliance with all applicable laws.
All right. Any question or comment from the board? All right. So with that, can I have a motion to approve the temporary mobile food vendor permit for Hot Smoke, conditional to all applicable laws? Or
So moved.
With all applicable laws.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, Matt Beaver's aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right, then could I have a motion to approve the temporary mobile food vendor permit for Papalius wood-fired pizza, conditional to compliance with all applicable laws?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second,
Any discussion? Hearing none, Matt Beaver's aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right, great. I think that releases Tom.
All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, do you think we can do minutes in 2 minutes? No pun intended. I had minor edits to the 9-6 minutes. Anyone else?
I
Rebecca.
did too. Just a couple of typos.
Yep, that was it for me as well.
Yeah, minor.
All right, so do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the 9-6 meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Matt Beaver's aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. I don't see. Now we could talk
2-minute item.
2-minute item. I mean, Brush Hill Homes could be a 2-minute item potentially. I don't know if there's going to be a longer discussion or it's sort of our usual letter.
And even less than usual.
Yeah.
So it's really, I guess the main issue is that it doesn't meet the 5 feet to groundwater. Anyway, I haven't started that yet.
I don't recall if we have any. Here's the document.
I guess given the timing of when it'd be due, I'll do my best to draft something by the next meeting, but also if people have comments, if they could jot them down and not send them, but bring them into our next meeting. If there's something special you think should be incorporated in this letter.
Yeah, that sounds good. We actually do have an opportunity here to have a meeting before they're due, which often we don't. So I think if you want to draft comments and then we can review sort of them in more detail at the next meeting.
Okay.
Bob, I see you have a comment. If you can do it in less than a minute before it's 7:31, then sounds good.
Sure, absolutely. I guess I would just ask Daryl if she has information. I don't. We haven't done any comprehensive testing on that site. And so I don't know where ultimately we'll find depth to groundwater. I know some testing. I know some testing has been done, but I'm not going to jump to the conclusion of where depth to groundwater is until I've had an excavator all over the site. So let's keep an open mind, please.
As I think about it, I think it was more a comment relayed to me that someone said if the town permitted mounding, that you would be building something different there. So hearsay, that was hearsay.
Yeah, we haven't tested the site yet. Is all.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll probably plan for this on the next agenda then, and we'll discuss agenda later. We'll plan for this in the next agenda. All right. With that, it's 7:31. We are already late for the only timed appointment we had, which is in keeping with Board of Health tradition. Also, as part of Board of Health tradition, we have the good Dr. Vitale, who couldn't stay away, to come talk to us about the North Sherborn Water District. Matt, do you want to sort of, what would be used to show here?
If I can share my screen, that might work best. And I will acknowledge that while I was muted, I did vote in favor of all the food permits after Rebecca. And so if you stop sharing, I will start sharing. Perfect. I am hoping that you guys are seeing the Coolidge Street Housing Development PowerPoint. Perfect. And
Yes.
and is the audio coming through okay?
Yep.
Perfect. So what I'm hoping to do tonight is to just review some of the work and discussion that's been done about the North Sherborn Water District, to kind of make sure that you guys have had a chance to hear about it. This has also been discussed at select board meetings, and I think will be discussed again at an upcoming meeting in the context of the warrant articles next month. So my goal is to kind of give an overview and context of the project and to try to address any kind of Board of Health specific feedback that comes in, or invite any other thoughts that the board may have that would help inform those discussions. So by way of background, the Coolidge Street housing developments are related to two projects that are kind of proposed and approved in North Sherborn, but that had a contingency of having access to a municipal water and sewer supply. The two projects are Meadowbrook Commons, which is an EA development, 10% affordable, 67 duplex triplex units with 7 affordable properties added to the state housing inventory. And then Coolidge Crossing, which is a 40B with 120 rental apartments, 25% affordable, but all 120 count towards the housing inventory. The legislative process that is being proposed is to create a North Sherborn Water and Sewer District as a distinct legal entity. This would be governed by a 5-member board, 2 members of which would be appointed by the largest users. Ultimately, that would be the 40B project and the HOA for the EA housing, as well as 3 members appointed by Sherborn elected officials, with 2 being appointed by the select board and 1 being appointed by the water commissioners. Both the select board and water commissioners are elected officials, and a 4 out of 5 vote is required for decisions. This legislation would establish the district boundaries, as well as the process for how water and sewer capacity would be allocated. And so essentially this act of the legislature defines the parameters and creates the district. And upon creation, the district then exists as a distinct legal entity separate from the town of Sherborn. The geographic boundaries of the district are outlined here. The blue line that you see coming down is the water main coming from Framingham, extending down Kindle Ave and then onto Coolidge. This is not an engineered drawing. This is just a sort of illustration. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it will dead end versus a loop pipe or some other strategy. This is the bounds of the district and the course of the line. The yellow properties here are properties currently serviced by Framingham Water or Sewer, which would also be incorporated within that district. The blue dots are pressurized fire hydrants. In terms of the kind of other pieces of it, so the legislation establishes the geographic parameters of the district, and then there's an intermunicipal agreement entered into with Framingham that defines the total volume of water and sewer available to that district. That volume is limited by the infrastructure on the Framingham side of the line, as well as the cost associated with any betterments that would increase that flow. So this is not a sort of blank check to say, take as much water as you want. This sounds lovely. It's really to say, there's a process that defines the scope of the water flow, which defines the sizing of the pipe and infrastructure on the Framingham side and the cost associated with any improvement with that. To make any change to that IMA limit would require a renegotiation of the agreement with Framingham, and then would need to be approved at a Sherborn town meeting. In terms of the project itself, the core infrastructure would be installed at the developer's cost in the future once the water district is created and the developer has kind of done their piece. Abutters within the district could tie into the line, though they would bear the cost of connecting in. So they could gain access, but would have an outlay out of pocket to do so. That all happens after the initial installation. And the sort of first pass it will be to put in the line to the projects and tie into all that. In terms of the IMA water and sewer capacity, there are two parts to this. One is the base capacity, which is reserved for properties in the district so that they can decide kind of into perpetuity whether they decide to tie into the line. So we don't want sort of a boomer approach where we've got water, get it or get lost. It's to say, if you decide to connect in 10 years, there should be capacity reserved for you should you decide to do that then. That is based on the current land use at the time of the town meeting that approves the legislation. For Meadowbrook, which if we go back to that map earlier, would essentially require a subline that goes down Meadowbrook. That would then be decided by the residents of Meadowbrook served by that line, whether they vote to or decide to extend that line, which then has costs that are accrued to those impacted properties by the district. So it has its own authority to sort of levy kind of any costs associated with a betterment for Meadowbrook. Everything else would not require a betterment. It would just be the individual property owner. Excess capacity is to create room for properties to be able to expand their flow modestly. So for example, if we consider a single family home elsewhere in Sherborn that has Sherborn variances but no Title V variances, they may be able to add a bedroom in the context of replacing a septic system. And if you don't have some excess capacity, property owners within this district would be more constrained than the rest of the town would be, which is not the intent. So it's kind of trying to find a balance between managing the scope of the impact of this project while giving flexibility to the properties within the district for kind of other applications. I am sorry, I need just 1 second. And then if we have excess capacity, that would go through the district commission to approve the allocation. So for example, if somebody was converting a property from a single family home to multiple homes or other pieces, that would fall into Sherborn zoning for the constraints on the property, and then would go to the water district for design flow implications and capacity. If excess capacity isn't available, then you couldn't expand the use of that water without a revision of the IMA, which would then need to be voted on at a town meeting. Sorry. And so I think the big pieces are the rationale behind doing this is that in order to get these properties and projects built, allow Sherborn to get to safe harbor in terms of the affordable housing inventory and the requirements the state has put in place. It doesn't mean definitively that the developer currently considering that these parcels will decide to develop them. It doesn't mean that it sort of all automatically happens. So I think of it as a necessary but not sufficient condition. There's no cost to the town associated with this, and in the future, the district is the body that bears the cost of replacement and revision. And then upon completion, it will transfer ownership from the installing body. Right now, if all moves forward, we would anticipate that would be Toll Brothers, who is kind of doing their due diligence, but if they decide not to, a different developer could pursue it. The town will not own the water and sewer infrastructure, and there's no impact on other property taxes. I think the other question that's come up in some of these discussions is what happens if Toll Brothers decides not to buy the properties or to pursue the project, and then you'd have an IMA and a water district, but no infrastructure that connect them to Framingham. So any project that did decide to move forward with that would then need to develop and build the infrastructure and bear the costs associated with that, which are fairly significant. And so then the next piece is just kind of how does this tie into safe harbor, and how do we kind of think about the impact of these projects on getting us there? So for a 2020 census, there are about 1,570 homes in Sherborn. We then need to hit 157 to get 10% safe harbor. We currently have 48 or 3.1%. That these two projects bring in 127 units to the SHI, which takes us to 11.3%. If we assume that the 2030 census is 1570 plus those 187, that takes us to 1757, which requires 176 houses in that inventory, which would take us to 9.9%. We do have several outstanding 40Bs that are not included in this. So presumably if any one of those were approved and the kind of general math holds, we would remain in safe harbor as kind of a projection. As an alternative to this about what happens if you don't have a district and a kind of large point project is these projects which have already been approved are, you would have to have a very large number of smaller projects in order to get to the SHI 10% inventory. And again, as these are added in to the denominator of the 2030 census, you'd kind of be back out of safe harbor despite building many, many, many developments. Rebecca, I see your hand up. I'm happy to tackle it now. I might suggest we get all the way through and then do it. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. I would not want to talk to you till you're done.
Sounds good. I just have a couple of slides left.
Yeah.
So in terms of the process, October 18th, if town meeting votes yes on the 17th, and on the 18th, the select board submits legislation to the state legislature. The Sherborn Select Board appoints 5 provincial North Sherborn Water Sewer District Commissioners in November of 2023. In November and December, the IMA and the Select Board would kind of go through that set of political bodies with the Sherborn Select Board, Framingham Mayor and City Council, as well as the commissioners. And then into next spring and summer would be the establishment of the water district. And upon issuing of the building permits, we'd be at 11% affordable housing in the housing inventory. So I think that gets kind of to the highlights of it. I'm going to just stop sharing, but can start sharing if people have kind of map questions, but questions are welcome.
You want to go ahead, Rebecca? You're muted.
There we go. Hi. My question is just, so I see that the water district will be its own legal entity. Who pays for the costs and the, I don't know, if something were to go wrong, whose financial responsibility would it be if it's not going to be fall on the taxpayers?
So that would be the district's responsibility. So it's its own legal entity established by the state legislation. And so it would be responsible for setting fees, allocating reserves, and doing the things necessary to support replacement costs with the system or other things that could develop over time. And so they would be assigning those fees to individual property owners as well as the kind of large institutional users with the 40B and the HOA.
So that would so those would be the people who are using the services, and it would be completely managed by them, by the entity and its users, independent of us. And it will be a public water supply, presumably, so it also would be under the jurisdiction of the state.
Yep, it would be exactly. So it would be the public water supply would be essentially transiting MWRA water from Framingham into Sherborn using MWRA pipes. And so I think the regulated water supply would be in Framingham. The district would then gain access to that. But again, I think the other constraints are if Sherborn said, oh, no, we want to do something different later, it may be that the district wouldn't reach the same conclusion and could say, nope, we're not going to do that. Or, we don't want to pursue that. So it really is a truly distinct legal entity as opposed to a sort of town extension. It's certainly has a voice of the town represented in the appointed positions, but it is a fully distinct legal entity.
And it would also be, if there are any, say Framingham or the other towns involved in the MWRA, any costs that are incurred through that would also be managed by the legal entity.
Correct.
Thank you.
Bob, I see your hand up, but I want to just see if anybody else on the board has comment first. Do Do we have any other questions from the board?
Yes, I have a comment. It's Daryl. Oops, sorry, Julie, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I didn't have a question, but I had a discussion point amongst the board. But that can wait. Go ahead, Daryl.
Okay, I was just going to comment that I thought the concept of possible expansion of the homes there and how that might affect the infrastructure and the capacity of the infrastructure was something that had never crossed my mind before. So, interesting point. That's all.
I'd agree. It feels like there was a sort of at least a good sense of forward looking in the construction of this. Julie, what was your point?
The point that I was thinking about was for the existing single family homes that are on well and septic. If this was in existence and they had this option, imagine we'd have to consider how we manage those wells and septics going forward. If they decide to opt in, what happens to their wells and septics? If they decide that they don't want to participate and they need a ton of variances for some reason, what do we do with that? So I think that's a future discussion item. But certainly for those folks who are looking at the general chemical plume, I'm excited that they have this opportunity.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Has this already been authorized by MWRA, or is this still in process by those involved with the procedure of getting authorized for this extension of MWRA distribution?
So I think this is still in process. So I think that the IMA is kind of that piece of it. My understanding that in general, the MWRA has capacity and is happy to look for consumers of that capacity. So I think Framingham is kind of the key negotiating partner right now, as I understand it. And that negotiation is sort of only relevant if there's a water district to then kind of manage it.
To Julie's point, I think that's good. I think it probably we would want to reflect on our existing regulations and think about if someone does choose to connect into this, that our existing regulations regarding well abandonment and septic abandonment would sort of cover that situation. And I think that's true. If not, it's hard for me to imagine someone choosing not to replacing a whole septic system instead of doing this. It seems like that would be a financially poor decision on their part, but people make bad decisions all the time. So yeah, I think we would want to have to think about ensuring how does sort of a failed septic system within the district potentially impact things. In theory, it shouldn't, right? Because the water's just getting pumped in from somewhere else. But I think we would want to sort of think about how we regulate that and whether what we have currently is enough. Other comments from the board? Bob, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, Matt. First thing I want to say is that I'm very much in favor of this. I think bringing water to North Sherborn is a great thing for the community. I think we'll all be able to kind of understand what that looks like and how it works. And my thinking is it would be great to expand it certainly to the downtown, where I know a lot of folks have concerns about the density of the downtown. So I'm very much in favor of this. That said, I think it's really important that the communications around what this means and what it doesn't mean need to be, folks need to be honest with the voters. So one clarification I'd like to make to Matt's answer to Rebecca about who's responsible for costs. The answer to my reading of the legislation, Matt, and you can tell me if you disagree with this, but I've read the draft legislation very carefully, and I believe it says that the district can effectively tax everyone in the district. In other words, if you don't sign up for the water and sewer, that doesn't mean you're not going to get charged if you live in the district. They have the right to tax everyone in the district. And like I said, I'm in favor of this. I'm not telling you that because I want you to vote no. I want you to vote yes. But I do think people need to understand what the legislation says. And on that same issue of wanting transparency. Matt, and I've heard this explained in different ways, and so I'm hoping, Matt, that you can clarify it for me. If a theoretical developer owned a piece of land in the district, and theoretically there was 11,000 gallons of excess capacity in the water system, and that developer wanted to build 100 bedrooms of affordable housing, is that developer guaranteed of getting that capacity? Or I'm assuming all the appropriate development permitting. I'm just talking about the North Sherborn Water District's ability to deny a developer the excess capacity if it exists. I'm hoping you can comment on that, Matt.
Oh, I definitely can't, Bob. I
Okay, thank
would
you.
say I think that's a fine question to ask
Yeah.
the select board, but it's probably out of scope for my expertise, and none of us are well served by me speculating. I think, and again, I would defer to council and the select board. My understanding in terms of the taxation is that they certainly can levy. And that I actually think I mentioned early in the discussion where I talked about the betterment and the Meadowbrook piece. So that would be an example of that taxing authority. So from a transparency standpoint, I'm sorry if that wasn't clear enough for you, but hopefully you've helped elucidate that for folks. Again, what I would say, yeah.
I was just going to say, if
no,
you could go back to the slide on the topic, this is where the confusion comes from, is that slide. So if you could bring up the slide that's titled Allocation of Water Sewer Capacity.
Well, Bob, I think I already said I'm not going to make a comment on that. So I think if you're talking about the taxation pieces.
No, I'm not talking about the text. I'm talking about
yeah. So again,
the slide, and I'm asking a question about it.
No, totally. But I think you already asked, are you going to comment on if the developer wants 11,000 gallons? What is the rule? And I think I already stated, I'm not the person to answer that question for you. And I don't think this presentation is the place to do it. I would suggest you sort of raise that at the select board meeting.
Okay, so I'll just finish by saying that lots of different folks have gone around to various groups like you're doing tonight, and it's great to educate people. But when the answer to the question and the description of how it works is different on 5 different meetings with voters, I find that problematic from a democracy point of view. Everybody should get the correct information. It shouldn't be different in 5 different presentations. And that's why I'm asking tonight. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that, Bob. I'd say, again, I think it's the same deck in those presentations, so I'm surprised that it'd be substantially different. I hear that you feel like there's a difference in that information. I'd sort of invite questions from others, but I think the goal is to certainly be consistent and transparent as we're able to.
So I think the other question is, I think this was helpful to get all this information. Is there an action that the board can take here that would be sort of helpful or useful? Or is this, I mean, my sense is that this is mostly informative for us, and I think it has been. And I think ultimately this is going to go to town meeting. And that's where the deciding is going to happen. Is that accurate?
Exactly. I think folks who are interested in further discussion of the articles certainly are welcome to attend the select board as they kind of consider the warrant articles and discuss, and then it'll be advisory as well. I think one of the goals is that I think every board sort of has its own perspective. And while I'm a recuperating Board of Health member, just to kind of make sure that that lens is represented. And I think the questions that Julie raised about thinking about what are the other legislative or sort of bylaw implications or regulatory implications for the board in the context of, if we do have a district, I think are good ones to think about, but are not immediately actionable and are probably moot until there's a system that exists that individual citizens can connect to. I think there's an open invitation to share feedback, or if other things occur to you outside of the context of this meeting, feel free to kind of reach out to probably Jeremy Marcette, the town administrator who kind of pulled together the group helping think about this on that work group, or Mary Neutra has done a ton of work on this. And so I think this is a better project with more thoughts and inputs and the expertise of everybody. So feel free to reach out if there are things that occur to you or that you worry about. I think one thing we did say or did recommend was that failure of a system would not be a requirement to connect. So I certainly would expect that most property owners, when faced with replacing a system, particularly in an area of town that tends to be pretty challenging between ledge on one side and water on the other, it's a tough area to kind of do work. And so I think would be appealing to be able to have some recourse and tie into that.
I will say that I'm sad it's not coming all the way down Coolidge for my inevitable eventual septic failure. But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
no, I think overall from the board perspective, I think, you know, as I've sort of been on the board the last few years and seen the challenges with a lot of, you know, getting systems in a lot of places in town, this does seem like a really great solution to the housing density problem and the housing availability problem, to sort of bypass a lot of the constraints that we've seen in a lot of other areas in town. So I'm encouraged by this. Dan, I just saw your hands up. Sorry, go ahead.
It occurred to me while we were talking about septic failure and kind of adding on to the thoughts that Julie brought forward. And I guess it has to wait until whether the town passes it or doesn't pass it, because we're also then going to have to deal with the situation that someone say it passes and someone's home's in the district and their septic fails. Well, if we know things are going to move forward with sewer, how does that then impact them having the time frame for them replacing their system? I mean, it would be awful for them to have to replace the whole septic system, and then 2 months later they get sewer, or could get sewer, but they're not going to hook into because they just spent 40 grand or whatever.
I can help with that if you want. If there's a sewer district, you can request an agreement to not correct your septic system by replacing it. And it's allowed, if I remember right, up to 5 years. I worked in a town that allowed these type of agreements, and that's conditional to no backup of sewage, as well as no overflow into the house, backing into the house or off the ground. So that's what I can remember from the agreements we made in the town of Ashland.
Okay. No, that's good to hear, because I mean, that is pretty extreme when it backs up into the house. I mean,
And
thanks.
Mark, I imagine it might be expensive to do, but could there be some sort of Band-Aid approaches, such as a tight tank and then taking it off site, or, you know, preventing things from continuing on into the leach field?
That's a possibility. I know the state frowns, especially the Department of Environmental Protection, on tight tanks. They don't want the tight tanks, but with this type of an agreement, they may allow it. It's a little different from someone else just requesting a tight tank only. So that might be a possibility if there was above ground sewage or backup into the house.
I think one other comment I just wanted, again, we've had a number of discussions as we both thought about it and then talking to people in the district as well. You know, the question of how does this affect building density has come up. I think that ultimately, right now, all the presence of the district doesn't change any Sherborn zoning. So everything that's zoned the way it is would continue to be zoned the way it is. I think what's appealing about satisfying the state requirements for that SHI inventory is that it then lets you use Sherborn regulations to regulate property development within the town. But the water district in and of itself doesn't change any of the other zoning, though it certainly may make areas buildable that would otherwise not be buildable with the current groundwater or other constraints.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
You can stick around for the rest of the meeting if you want. No. Okay. All right. So that was useful and informative. Let's see. Let me go back to show. You know what? I think I closed my meeting documents. Hang on. Let me go back to sharing. All right. We'll pull up the agenda. All right, so I believe I did not see you. So I think let's move on to agents business, actually, because I did see we had some other people here. I did not see anyone from 13 Corsebrook, but I did see Mr. Abramian here for 31 Southfield. Is that accurate?
I'm not for sure if I saw anyone for 13 Corsebrook as well. But if you want, we can bring up the 31 Southfield plan and
sounds good.
Look at the changes that were made since we discussed this at the last meeting. The board had reviewed 3 rooms on the basement level. And the owner was advised that he may want to consider taking down the proposed walls and to make it one large room, which it's showing now as one large room as a cardio gym area with, and I can't see it that well, but I believe I read it right, a half bath. So as long as it's not a full bath, and I think he's pretty much aware of that, so that should not be a problem. And then the assessor's card was drawn to determine the actual room count that was allowed for this property. And it is a 2-bedroom by the decision of the appeals board when it was reviewed. And you'll see it to the, I'm pointing to it, thinking I'm pointing, but your cursor's right there. Your cursor was right at it, yes. 5 rooms, 2 bedrooms. And that's pretty much what's allowed. It's showing 5 bedrooms in, if I'm looking at it right, 5 rooms and 2 bedrooms. I think they're counting the first floor as 3 rooms. Second floor has a large loft to remind you of the plans, and the 2 bedrooms upstairs. So with that said, because there was some discussion if the first floor was 2 or 3 rooms, and the assessors are considering it 3 rooms. So with that said, we would be going to 6 rooms if we are. The board usually has mechanisms in place and tools to consider a 6th room if you are only allowed 5, and that would be the deed recording that we have used in the past. But I'll leave it up to the board to decide on that. And I believe the homeowner's here as well if he wants to, if the board so wishes to hear from him.
All right, so I think that clears up a couple of really the issues from last time, is that there was discussion of the overall room count, which it looks like would now be 6. So 5 based on the assessor's card. And then, and I know we had discussion about whether we considered it at 5 or 6 or 4 or 5, but I think 5 is reasonable, particularly given that additional info. And then this, I think, clearly is now 1 room without any, before I think we were in the sort of 2 to 3 range based on the partitions, but it's clearly 1 room now, which would still bring it to 6. And so then the discussion becomes using a deed recording for this space.
Right. So, and I really appreciate the consolidation or reconfiguration of this to be just 1 room. The tricky thing for me is that we've been instructed by ZBA to treat all properties in town the same. And this has a walkout. And I don't believe we've been deed recording walkouts as a rule.
That is a good point, Darrell.
That's a good point. Is this a walkout to grade rather than a bulkhead or something here?
I believe it is. We talked about that at the last meeting. I think he indicated it's a walkout.
Okay. Brian, I see your hand up. We'll do some discussion on the board first, and the property owner. Yeah, I think that does make it trickier, right? If it's got separate access, so it's a walkout. It's sort of too easy to turn that into a bedroom in the future.
And in the words of a prior board member who always used to talk about the slippery slope, and by what's happened in other towns, once you make this exception, then it's for everybody. So that just starts making it complex.
Can I ask one small question, because maybe I'm not understand fully, so what else I can do there? Because on a first floor, I don't know how they're count. I mean, it's just one area, yeah, and the kitchen. It is, I mean, it's definitely not 3 room. And then I down the basement, and I mean, I just try to, use the one area, and if I need to close that exit, if I understand correctly, because English is not my mother language, I can't maybe understand the deepest details in that. So, but my goal, it's not a bedroom. I mean, I'm not going to raise the count of living space or whatever. I can even not build then any bathroom over there. So for example, if it's requirement, because I don't need, I have 2 bathrooms. I'm okay with that, so I can go upstairs for that reason. Yeah, it's not gonna be, I can close the, for example, I mean, permanently close the exit if this is the case for that. So, but right now it's dirty. I mean, it's not usable place with lots of, spiders, and there are no lights, there are nothing, there are moisture. I mean, there is not usable for anything. Nobody, and I really need to use that for a physical purpose, because I'm a sick, I'm a pre-diabetic. I'm
Yeah.
already thought about that. So,
But I think sort of the point that's not usable, that your current septic system limits you to 5 rooms. And so I think that's where we are. And I think we have a lot of precedent for in situations in which for these, we're using the assessor's card to define the room count. And so I think the question for the board then is closing that egress door, like permanently closing that egress door, would that sort of change our opinion on things? If that's even, I don't even know if that would be allowed by code, but that's not a question for us, right?
Yeah, I guess from a health and safety standpoint, cutting off an egress just seems like not a.
But I guess, if it's replaced with an egress window.
We want to just say the answer is to just put in a bigger septic system, and then you can do whatever you want.
This is a giant combined septic system for this whole project. It's not just this home. This is the fields at Sherborn. So there's no just expanding.
Right. I see. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot
So
it was part of the fields. I just forgot it was part of the fields.
and we were concerned about how enticing this large, in all of the units, these large basements would be.
Yeah.
And yet the system is sized for the rooms that were there. So,
yeah.
So just for Mr. Abramian, we look not at how current occupants are using a space. We look at the space and what the potential is for it for future uses. So that's how we're supposed to be evaluating things, not kind of as it is, or as it is currently being used or intended to be used.
Yeah, but actually I'm not going to sell this. I can sign it, whatever paper it needed. I know that it's one of a common practice, but I'm not going to sell it anyway, because this is restricted, and I'm not, I'm not.
I think the point is that, not to be morbid, but like, you also won't live there forever. And so future use extends far into the future.
Yes.
So it's, there's sort of no way around that issue.
And what I allowed to do? I mean, nothing at all, or I can very hygienically put something, just to, because it's not comfortable and not healthy to do anything over there.
Yeah, so I think that's the issue we're trying to discuss, and so let's sort of give the board a chance to discuss more. It is possible that you may not be able to do anything here, and that is sort of a limitation of the way that our septic systems work, is that you are limited in the amount of finished space you can put in your house.
Right.
And
so one option could be, and again, I don't know exactly what the space looks like now. You could finish the floor, but not finish the ceiling.
It's okay.
If there's something that's unfinished, or finish the floor, but not the ceiling and the walls. There's something that it's basically unfinished, or finish the ceiling and not the floor. I mean, something has to be unfinished in there for it to not count as a finished room.
Okay. Okay, even that, it's better than nothing. I mean, I put something on a floor, because that's dirty. I mean, it's not possible to clean, even because it's concrete, and it's not comfortable for that one. Yeah.
Right.
But if I somehow I can do nothing on a ceiling. It's nothing. I mean, it's not worried about. So it's and I'm not allowed to put any bathroom or whatever. Yeah, any hot. Nothing, yeah, just hygienically. And what about something just to cover I mean, not finish the walls as it, but it's maybe some movable things, just aesthetically. I mean, cover that, not the finish, not the put dry walls, but something, yeah, because it's still, it's gonna look ugly. I mean, it's not good.
Well, could you just put a drop carpet that's not attached to the floor just to keep the dust down?
Oh, drop carpet. Okay, yeah, it's possible actually. Something like this. I don't know if it's enough or no.
Is that if it's not finished, right? If they're poured concrete walls, you know, you could paint them, you could hang a picture on them, right? You could hang a mirror on them for working out, but putting up drywall would probably be too much. Putting a finished ceiling in would be too much. But you know, there are sort of interim things you could do to make the space usable. But it can't be finished in a way that it would turn into like a bedroom or a livable space.
Okay, and I still need to get some permit. Oh, for example, because I need anyway some plugs. I mean, electrical, yeah, just to to put some treadmill over there, some gym equipment over there, because I need something electrical over there.
I mean, you're allowed to put outlets in unfinished space, right? Like a garage or a basement, and so you would need an electrical permit to do those sort of things. And so I think if there was a sort of, you would have to get a permit to get get an electrician to come in and do that. But I think if it was a big enough building and permit that that a bath was being added and finished floors and ceilings were being added, that's what sort of triggers the review by us. But if it otherwise remains unfinished with a couple outlets, that's a different situation. Someone's not going to turn that into a bedroom.
Yeah, and I agree. Basements have electrical connections, so as long as it remains a basement, you could drop a carpet down, not wall-to-wall carpeting, but like a drop carpet. And you could have electrical outlets because basements are allowed to have electrical outlets, like for workshops and so forth. So I don't see where that would consider the room being a finished room.
Okay, and if I put final question, I'm not going to. Yeah, I know that I get. If I put something just to cover that aesthetically, the wall, I'm not allowed to do that. I mean, something like maybe plastic or I don't know, board or something. I mean,
I'll say that there's also kind of a challenge with for energy efficiency, having insulation on the wall, especially if, I mean, it might not be so important on the side walls, but for the back wall that's open to grade.
It's already insulated.
For energy efficiency, that would be a great thing. So I don't know if he finished the walls and put down drop carpet and didn't finish the ceiling, would we consider that an unfinished room? Just the walls are insulated essentially.
Yeah, I think,
which might mean
like
actual insulation, studs, wallboard.
It's okay with me. I mean, perfectly, because I don't need. I don't even look at ceiling now. so but it's if it's kind of walls and floor, that's completely enough. I don't gonna put any bathroom over there. I'm not gonna put any walls or whatever. But it's just one area, and it's not definitely not considered living space because it's not a bedroom, for any reason.
Yeah, I think that would be acceptable. I think where the sense I'm getting from the board is that, if finished the way proposed here in the picture on the screen, that would make it a 6th room. We can't do that. It's out to grade. We can't deed record that. But if it is, cleaned up in a way to make it usable without being finished space, that would be acceptable.
Okay.
And
I can tell
so
you.
is the ceiling currently rafters? Like you look up and you see the joists?
Yeah, it's how it's called. It's wooden.
Lines going across the.
Yeah, and then
okay.
and the pipes. Okay. Yeah, I can paint it somehow, whatever. No, yeah.
Yeah, no, but exposed floor joists and piping and things like that in the ceiling would be considered unfinished.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
So the next step is I would deny the permit, and you could speak to Chris about or you can update the permit, one or the other, but I will need to communicate with Chris that the proposal as shown cannot be approved.
Okay, but just can communicate the other option, yeah, to him. Just, you know.
No, that's for you to sit down with him or talk with
Okay.
him. I can't tell you how to design it outside of the fact we talked about a drop carpet and maybe some covering over the insulated side, the wall that's insulated on the back side.
Mhm.
That's the way
Okay.
I heard it. Is that correct, board members?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Good.
Brian, I see
Thank
your hand down. Was your question answered in the course of the discussion?
Thank you, Brian Moore, 49 Farm Road. Artem, I absolutely feel your pain having gone through this recently with a septic redesign installation that took $80,000 out of our pocket and put into a big pile of dirt in the yard. I think the board should come up with some consistent rules related to walkouts. If they're going to have them, they should be consistent and applied consistently for other people in the town. I also like the board to try to remember this as they look at other plans around town for development of larger scale attached dwellings, whether it be 40B or otherwise, because this is a slippery slope, as you said, and have pointed out tonight. Just because it can be built doesn't necessarily mean it should be built, because it's just going to present a habitual problem for the Board of Health to have to adjudicate for the next 40 or 50 years or 100 years or 200 years when people are on private water.
About this specific, because that's what's on the agenda is the specific applications and discuss.
I understand. I'd like the board to remember this discussion when they are talking about other projects for approval in the town.
Okay. So I think
Brian,
Yes.
if you had been present for the Fields at Sherborn discussions, you would know that we went over these very issues and for many other projects. And it's out of our hands. They call it an unfinished basement, and it's a large appealing space. We have dealt with that. We have addressed it. We are not supported at the state reviewing board level for these 40Bs. So.
But do you know, I might only one last question, sorry about that. So I know that my old neighbors, I don't know how. I mean, their old basement are finished, all of them. I don't know. Maybe I don't know all of my neighbors, but which one I seen for example, my neighbors in both sides and whatever. I mean, I feel that it's not fair. I mean, sometimes, yeah.
They had
I understand.
so you know, they had a 3-bedroom unit. That's what made a little difference.
Oh yeah, maybe. Yeah.
The 3-bedroom unit, you're allowed a larger number of rooms.
Okay, good. Yeah, I understand. Good, thank you.
All right. Should we just, Mark, you want to update us on 13 course? So I think we're done with 31 Southfield. Mark, you're not going to approve it, and we can sort of move on from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to? Sorry,
yes,
did you need something from us?
No, I'll just I'll deny the building application for it, and then you know, we'll see where it goes from there, you know, with new proposal and so forth. Are you all set with that, Adam? You know, that's the way we normally do it.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Horsebrook, Mark?
Yes, on 13 Coursebrook, I don't know if you have it there. We received an email from the homeowner. When we approved the septic plan, there were animals close by, if not over the area of the septic system. Yeah, where the proposed septic system was going. So the board noted that there'd have to be an electrical fence of some type to keep the animals off the septic system. And in doing so, that condition was part of the plan approval, but the homeowner has now indicated, although he has a barn on the property, and I know he as you can see here, he's indicating he's not planning on having animals. But I don't know about future owners, because there's a barn on the property right near the septic system that you could, on the back side, they could walk out and they'd be near the septic system again. So I don't know how to go forward with this. And I explained that to the homeowner, and he wrote this email, and I'm bringing it to the board for your review.
Yeah, I remember that we had sort of multiple meetings about this and sort of concerns about whether the leach field would be used as sort of grazing area or walking area for the horses, and ultimately had to sort of request putting a fence. Having said that, this seems somewhat reasonable. You know, I guess I could have a fence walk or a horse walk on my septic system too, but if I don't have a horse, then I don't need a fence, right? So I'm sort of inclined to try to find a way to make this work. We
I
don't
could sign off the
normally
certificate.
fence up their septic systems, even if there's a barn on the property, right?
Yeah, no, I understand. I could sign a certificate and on it I could put no large animals are to traverse over the septic system area, something like that, just so it's on record.
I would rather have a deed recording because this issue didn't come up during the meeting when we were talking, when we were deciding this. That they had a barn, they seemed to want to have horses, right? Because they challenged whether you could have horses on top of a septic system, and they didn't mention the possibility of not having horses. So is this a barn that really looks horse ready? Is it a marginal barn? Or
I was in the
will the
barn.
next owner need a fence? And we need to make sure, I don't think just on the certificate would be enough. I think a deed recording would be necessary, but how are we ever going to know?
Yeah.
Right, with the new owner. That
Yeah, the barn is horse ready as of 2 years ago when he brought me through it. In fact, there was a horse in it at that time. So, but now he's saying he's not planning on having animals, so it is a tricky one.
And I understand that not all barns have horses. Not all properties with barns have fences, but they do have septic systems, we know. So, Matt, I could see your point. I just want to, if we're going to amend it, I would want at least a deed recording. I don't know if there's something else could be done. Because it'd be a shame, because we're always seeing the people who buy a property, they put the horse in, they think it can run anywhere, then their septic system fails and it's a big expense, and we're the ones delivering the bad news about something.
Yeah.
I don't know if the homeowners are here. There's two homeowners representing the property, so I'm not for sure if they are. They should at least let us know.
Mark, since this is new to me and I've never seen this property or a map, I'm trying to visualize what this looks like. So I can imagine a barn and I can imagine an adjacent pasture area.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's a fence somewhere.
Yeah, it's on the outskirts of the property.
And where is the, oh, here we go. Thank you.
There we go.
And where is the, thank you, Matt.
So there's the existing barn.
And so then the fence is
on the outside area of
20 feet out, 25 feet out.
Yeah, and actually the whole property is fenced from the front to the back. And so in the back area, the lot line, very close to the lot line, you see that fence.
Yeah.
And so, and it goes to the existing barn.
Yeah.
So that's the way it's set up.
Yeah, and so here's this existing fence. So yeah, this was an extensive discussion, and I think it was abutters that initially notified us of sort of the presence of horses here. And so there's the existing barn with this fenced area, but there was access, and then they had proposed an electric fence basically here around the system with no livestock permitted over system.
So keeping the existing fence, adding an additional.
Also putting one immediately around the perimeter of the system. And so what they've not done is put a fence around the system, but I also get that plenty of people have systems that are not fenced off. I get what you're saying also with the deed recording, Daryl, but I think on the other hand, we don't deed record everyone's property to say don't drive heavy equipment over your septic, right? But you shouldn't do that either.
Right. Well, but the horses, right, you shouldn't do that either. But the horses is just something people would also not think of.
Yeah, but I think
the compaction of a large animal over a long period of time would likely damage.
I guess my concern is I don't want to get into a pattern where we deed record all of the things you shouldn't do with a septic system. Because there's a long list of them, right? And
yeah.
I mean, on one hand, I do sort of like this no livestock permitted over system is on the approved plan. And so we do have some documentation that we don't want anything traipsing over the system.
Okay, so maybe that, and how about the requirement that inside the barn, there's similar to the garbage grinder, no garbage grinder markings that go under sinks in kitchens. That's a requirement that we have when you get a garbage grinder exemption. You have to post something in the barn that says, shows the map maybe of where the leaching field is, about it. If there's an animals, maybe other than chickens going in the barn, that they need to put up the fencing at that time, or otherwise prevent animals from going on top of it. Would that work, Mark? Akin to the garbage, you're on mute.
Thank you. It may work. Will it be followed? It's hard to say. I could have them posted as built in the garage, in the barn, as well as the house. And it could have a statement on it, no heavy livestock over septic system area. And I'll take a picture of it showing it's posted, but there's no guarantee it's going to stay there.
Well, I feel like at least it would be us trying a little bit more. It would be akin to the garbage grinder. And we're trying to protect people against themselves from damaging a system that they might not appreciate, that dynamic could happen. So
yeah, I totally agree with like the need to sort of continue to like let people know what to do with their system. I think my worry is using the deed recording to do too much of that, when like there's sort of probably a lot of things that people in town are doing wrong with their system that I wish they knew better, and probably I wish I had known better before, you know, I had a septic, but I don't know if a deed recording is the right tool for that.
Yeah.
To disseminate.
Okay. I'd be happy with the signage inside and the other notation, Mark, that you mentioned. You're on mute again.
Sorry. No heavy thank you, Daryl. No heavy livestock are to be allowed over the septic leaching area. And it will be on this, well, there will be an as-built, it'll be on that, and that'll get posted in the barn. And
maybe it should say something like, for protection of the integrity of the leaching field, no animal, just so they know why, as opposed to they read it and think that's crazy.
Yeah.
Who's telling me that?
Yeah.
So.
We could add in the fact it would cost them tens and tens of thousands of dollars if they did. I mean, that might be motivating.
Well, we know that they are expensive, but I don't think I'll put the cost down, because every system is different.
Yeah.
Fair enough, Mark.
Okay, hopefully that will solve that. All right. I think that covers agent's business. We did heritage, we did Brush Hill. Should we do Board of Health job descriptions?
Yeah, could we go back to the last thing? Do we need to vote on something because we had the fence as a part of the plan?
Definitely. Another good point that the board should vote so that they've changed the previous approval.
Okay. Amended. Amended.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think how to word that. So maybe a motion to amend the previous approval requiring a fence to state instead that they should post notice that no livestock be allowed over the leaching system.
And include a statement to that effect on the certificate, Mark, is that what you were proposing to?
That is correct. They could put that I can put that on the certificate of compliance for the septic system.
Okay, without us having to vote on that.
Yeah, okay. That would be fine. And that way you have two mechanisms in place, or two notices in place, one on the certificate of compliance as well as one in the barn. That would suffice.
Okay.
Someone want to try to make that motion?
No, not really. I
have a motion.
It was exciting. You did a great job on the first part. Now just add that.
I'll try again. So can I have a motion to amend the approval of the septic plan for 13 Course Brook to remove the condition that a fence be placed around the field and add notice on the certificate and a posting in the barn that no livestock be allowed over the system?
So moved.
And if it could say no heavy, I'm sorry to interrupt. It should say no heavy livestock, I guess. I know that's a general term, but they might have chickens, and that's not a big deal.
Okay, I'll move it with the addition of heavy. And maybe some other language as you write it out that is appropriate.
Okay.
Second.
Any more discussion? Does anyone want to discuss what constitutes heavy livestock?
No.
Really big chicken. All right. With any further discussion, without any further discussion, Matt Beaver's aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell abstain.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. Thanks, Mark. It's been a long week. I'm forgetting about the voting. All right. Now I think we're ready for Board of Health job descriptions.
Okay, I don't know that we're really going to go through them tonight, just more to update. Does that seem reasonable to you, Ellen? Because we really need to go through. We had some job descriptions, they got edited, but some things aren't quite accurate, so we need to re-edit. And it's been a busy week, so we haven't gone through that wholly yet.
Right.
Yeah,
I was given the job descriptions by the assistant town administrator who told me to look them over, and I did, and I found, quite a few parts that needed either correction or, like, for example, in the food inspector who does the camp inspections and the tobacco, that was included in the health agent's job description, so that has to be corrected.
Yeah, that's what's going to need to. I was thinking to say, Ellen, I'm sorry to interject right in the middle of your discussion, but 100% correct, Ellen. Because of the way it's set up in our town, they're going to have to take out the parts. Like I do the housing code, but Tom does the camps and the food inspections. So, I mean, I can do them as well, but the town has decided to separate the two jobs. So, I really do think it needs to. I'm sorry to interrupt. As Ellen was saying.
Yeah, and there were just some, I don't know if they were changes to words, something to do with water. It's changed from potability to portability, which doesn't make sense. So I have to go through them all and just make all the corrections and give them back.
So yeah, I noted the same thing. I noted that some of them were just not consistent with what's happening. So should we authorize Ellen to just make those corrections? Is that the sort of most expedient forward?
And then
I'll work with Ellen on it.
Yeah, okay. And the chair.
Yes, yeah, by all means.
Okay. Does anyone else on the board want to see any other particulars, or did everyone have a chance to review them?
I didn't want to see any particulars. I was impressed at Ellen's list.
Yeah.
Mark's as well, and everyone else, but yeah.
All right, so can I have a motion to authorize Mark and Ellen to work with the chair and vice chair as needed to edit these and return them back to the town administrator?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any more discussion? Matt Beaver's aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye.
All right. I think that closes out chair's business. We've been through agent's business. We have done, I'm coming to you, Julie. I'm just trying to knock out the easy things. Okay. We've done the everything in the minutes. Is the Eversource energy a quick one. This is their sort of the usual notice of responsibility. I'll try to find it here. So this was we get these from time to time, in which they get notification of a release of hazardous material at the location. In this case, it was the roadway in front of 2 Whitney Street. Any further comment on this one?
No, and this
Daryl,
is really
maybe.
just the beginning of the process of cleaning up. And
Do we know what it was?
I know sometimes it's not easy. It's not like in one spot in bold, like the release of the big underlined area was filled in. I was just going to pull it up to refresh my memory too.
Sean, do you know what it was? Sean raised his hand.
Yeah, I know what it was, and I'm wondering if they cleaned it up, because I know for a fact they didn't clean it up when they should have. There was a transformer that a truck took out a telephone pole at 2 Whitney, and the transformer fell and spilled down the road all the way to Whitney Drive. And unfortunately, we had a huge rainstorm right after that. So I don't know whether they cleaned it up in time. And I never saw this notice because it, as you know, they don't come to me, but I do question whether they ever cleaned any of it up. It was quite a mess. The road was shut down. It was a mess. Several telephone poles got snapped.
I mean, that's frequently what it is. It's a pole, we lose a transformer, and we get a release of something. And then we get this after some delay.
And
I mean, I guess that's
given what you, oh, sorry, finish. Sorry. Sean, given what you said about how the event unfolded, they might not really know what's there. Maybe they don't even know yet whether it's PCB containing transformer oil or non-PCB, and that's huge. Although that's pretty scary if they haven't determined that yet. Because I'm not seeing anything about what the exact material was or volume, which is unusual.
It was almost a brand new transformer. You can rest assured if I was standing there and I thought it was a PCB transformer, I wouldn't have ever left the scene. But
okay, if it was new, yeah, highly unlikely. But they have a very hard time identifying that. I've consulted with Eversource for a while, and it's not easy. Okay.
all right. So we've been informed in the vague way they use us.
Yeah, we don't have to do anything.
Okay.
Except tuck away in our memory in case someone's water ever shows PCBs or something else.
All right. And then I think what's left then is Julie, you wanted to discuss heat-related illness?
Well, sure. I thought this meeting was going to be faster, I'll be honest. So I will make this even shorter versus what I was intending to present. You know, one of the things I come to this board with is a kind of how climate change affects us locally perspective. And over this last summer and many summers, we've had quite a few heat waves. We know this is not just Sherborn, this is all around the world. And July was the hottest month on record. This trend is going to continue. And I read a pretty shocking statistic from the Chan School, which is within the next 2 decades, we're expected to have 20 to 30 more days where it's over 90, which is just kind of a shocking increase that's anticipated. And of course, it's not just raw numbers of temperature that affect us here in the Northeast. We have to contend with humidity as well. And so humidity makes a big difference in the body's ability to dissipate heat, because when you can't have sweat evaporate, you can't effectively cool yourself down. And I was going to go into at length about all the signs of heat stress and heat exhaustion and all of that, but I don't think I necessarily need to do that at this point in the evening, because maybe we can actually finish before 9 o'clock, but which is a goal, which is an absolute goal. But I bring this up not because it's anything within the specific purview of the board, but because I look around town and see that many other of our fellow committees and town organizations are dealing with this in real time. And so I did a little kind of survey to see how things are going, how people are dealing with it. I wanted to first talk about, hang on, let me go back to the vulnerable population. So the CDC identifies adults 65 and over, infants and children, pregnant women, outdoor workers, athletes who are performing outside, and low income households, as well as individuals with chronic medical conditions that are worsened in the setting of extreme heat. And so thinking about where are we vulnerable as a community at this time, first went to our outdoor workers, which would be DPW. And it sounds like they've got great systems in place in order to make sure that their guys are taken care of. They have water available, they have air conditioning within their building, within their trucks, they try to rearrange their jobs, they do lots of stuff. It sounds like a similar thing happens also at the fire station, and talking with Zach Ward. Same thing, the fire station's air conditioned, the truck's air conditioned, they have coolers, they rotate guys on jobs for not just extreme heat, but also for extreme cold. And I didn't get to talk to Zach to find out specifically what they're seeing in terms of medical emergencies that they're responding to from an EMS perspective, but I'd be very curious to know what they have seen, if they've seen anything in particular recently. As we know, Town Hall has air conditioning, so fortunately our municipal employees are also staying cool in extreme heat. Same with our police officers, it's a similar structure as it is with fire. Of course, the school is the biggest issue, and I'm sure all of us have heard about the issues at the school within the past couple of weeks, where they've had to do a half-day heat day, and then they did this incredibly creative alternative day where they tried to rearrange kids to cooling. I attended the school meeting last night virtually just to kind of hear where they're at. So they are going to be doing a feasibility study to look at the current systems and what they could do for cooling both short-term and long-term. And separate from this, they're also going to be doing an architectural study to examine the usable life of the building, which is a totally separate conversation. But the school is definitely it's the only building in the school district. It's the only building within the town campus that doesn't have cooling. And it's clearly one of our points that we need to be considering. And then the other area that I was really curious about was our seniors. And so I was talking with Sue Kelleher, and we'll meet with her next week just to learn more. If you recall, the COA did a community needs assessment last year, which was a really fantastic study that they partnered with UMass on. And reading through that study, it didn't explicitly survey access to cooling for our seniors, but there are a few indicators that would make us wonder how our seniors are doing. So first of all, our senior population is growing, and at present, 87% of our seniors live in single-family residences, which is a fair number. 8% live in condos or townhomes, and 5% are in multifamily homes or apartments or other housing environment. But the really telling question in there was, does your current residence need home repairs for a heating system or a new roof to improve your ability to live in it safely for the next 5 years? And 37% of them responded yes, which was a pretty shocking number. And 9% of those surveyed last year said that they could not afford to actually make these repairs. And while that doesn't explicitly call out cooling issues, you could see how it would fall under that umbrella. And one of the things that Sue told me that I was pretty flabbergasted by was, since 2016, the poverty rate in town has gone from 1% to 6%. And I believe she knows that because it's primarily amongst our elderly population. So I think we don't have a read on how our seniors are doing at home. And it's certainly one of the concerns that I would have as we go forward, because this is not an issue that's going to go away. It's in fact going to get worse. And oftentimes we see it on the news, we see the heat waves that are happening in Europe, and it's hard to then really process and discuss it locally, as this is climate related and we need to respond to it. And while the board is not the one responding, I do think that we have a couple of roles. One, by putting it out in the public dialogue, we make it easier for those other committees and town organizations who are grappling with this to say, yes, this is an issue that we're grappling with. I think we also have the ability to step forward and say, we are a resource. If you have public health questions, please come to us. We would be happy to discuss this with you and to help you. And then finally, communication. As we all know, we tend to silo into our own little committees and we know what we know, and especially amongst the constituencies. And again, looking at both the school and our elderly population, those are pretty distinct areas where if you have school-age children, you probably don't know what's happening in the older community and vice versa, right? And just that unifying message that we are able to communicate is that this is a issue that we're all facing as a town, I think is important to acknowledge. And it's just one of those health issues that go under the radar. So that's what I wanted to say, and just kind of get the board to support the work that is currently being done in town, and recognize that we're all in this together. And if you want to list the symptoms of heat exhaustion, I'd be happy to go through all of those, but I don't think we need to do that at this point in the evening.
I
Thanks,
think I would
Jill.
do better looking it up anyway and reading it to burn it into my brain, since I've learned it many times and can't name them all.
Yeah.
So,
Diana? Oh,
So
sorry.
I guess my question is, are you looking at this, Julie, as like the first step or the beginning of a concerted effort to take a look at, okay, climate change, we're going to have extreme heat that the town needs to look at next summer, plans for cooling centers? I mean, it sounds like the grammar school, Pine Hill, has got something in the works, but does the COA?
So I'm meeting with Sue next week, but it doesn't sound like there's an actual handle on how many of our seniors have access to cooling. Of course, that gets much more complicated too, because installing cooling requires money and having people come into your home. Operating cooling is very expensive, as we know. If you need to leave to go to a cooling center, you have to be physically able, have access, be comfortable in a large gathering in a foreign place. There's so many barriers for our seniors. I know Sue mentioned that Zach Ward, I believe, is looking into or speaking with the Red Cross about doing a regional cooling center, because I don't believe we have a cooling center in town. Does anyone know if we have a designated?
Not that I know that we do, but that is what, an idea or something we could think of? Because the seniors may be more comfortable staying in town than going to a larger place.
If they're able to access it. And one of the most creative public health programs in New York City that I saw was a buddy system. And particularly for a small community like ours, that's a pretty interesting idea. So instead of saying, everyone, it's your responsibility to know when you're too hot and be able to physically go out down the road, and instead having kind of partnerships, people who are paired up to be able to check in. And often it needs to be physically close. So it might be your neighbor, it might be, someone else down the street that you're close to, but some type of a system to try to make sure that a population that might not be as eager to reach out for help would have a comfortable way to seek help if they needed it.
I could also see. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Just because I think that sounds like an incredible idea for a way to approach this in a small community like this. Particularly when we have sort of smaller targeted populations that we think are particularly at risk. And I think that sounds like I think a buddy system would be a sort of a much easier approach than sort of just an anonymity and relying people on to sort of, particularly when you're concerned about transporting you there yourself. And I think potentially combined with a notification system. I don't know what happens in town. Do we have a reverse 911 or other sort of notification system that heat emergencies are incoming? And I think that combined with it's sort of the general reminder this is happening, and then that triggers you to check on your buddy. Is a thing. I have never been able to subscribe from the Boston emergency alert, so I still get an alert every time there's a heat emergency in Boston where all the cooling centers are and things.
Okay.
So,
and I was only going to add in there, it gets tricky. Like how do you define it's going to be hot? But certainly the heat index is a much better indicator because it actually marries temperature and humidity. And that's actually a key part, because if it was 95 degrees and 10% humidity, you can sweat pretty effectively. You have to stay hydrated and make sure you keep enough electrolytes in your system. But If it's 85 degrees and 80% humidity, the risk of overheating actually increases tremendously, right? Because your body just cannot dissipate heat when that kind of a humid environment. And that was one of the things that they said in the school committee meeting last night was it wasn't necessarily the high temperatures, it was the combination of humidity along with heat that really was exacerbating to the point where it became I mean, they described it as a safety risk to be in that building. And I think that's an important thing to consider.
I definitely see this as something that would extend to multiple groups in town and certainly not be Board of Health centric because we're just one piece. And some of those other pieces are big pieces, such as what our cooling centers are. So we've had historically more heating centers than cooling centers, but they're the same places, the places that have air conditioning and heat, like the library and town hall. That would be public spaces that we have control over, are nice, can accommodate people, not for sleeping over, not for some other things, but for a respite from the heat. And just reminding people that they're there. Certainly the library's there on a regular basis, but and to what length would the town be willing to go to kind of rearrange things in town hall if a bunch of people needed to find a place to cool off? I'm sure that the energy committee or sustainability committee could weigh in and maybe with some costs of options, remind people that if you can't cool your entire house, pick a room, and this size room needs this size air conditioning unit, and what are the rough costs to operate that? Something just to give people an idea of what their choices are. Might be another way to go about it.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And I think Diana asked, and I think Daryl asked too, I'm not suggesting that we suddenly step out and do something we've never done before. What I'm acknowledging is that there's lots of other committees and organizations who are doing this work. And I feel like we have not necessarily acknowledged this as a public health issue. And it's kind of that changing in how we perceive heat, where 20, 30 years ago, a hot day was kind of a nuisance, but it wasn't a risk. And as we are in this moment in time and going forward, it is becoming a health risk, and it is going to increasingly become a health risk. And that's what I'm really trying to kind of keep in the public dialogue.
No, and I think having more fluidity in these discussions across boards and committees and departments and groups and all the rest is a step in the right direction, because almost everything we do has complexity and overlap. And just getting in the swing of doing that, I think would help a lot on a lot of issues.
Yeah, resilience isn't built with pieces of yarn, it's woven into a net, right? And that's exactly what when I think about, we're coming on our 350th. That took a heck of a lot of resilience, and that's a feather in our cap, right? And it's not because those folks 250 years ago, 350 years ago, kind of ignored when there was a problem. They acknowledged it and they found a way to solve it together for the most part. And so, I just want to, that's the spirit in which I intend this.
Yeah.
I think Jeff
did you have
Well, I was just going to make a couple points. First of all, we have we're sort of reinforced public safety committee. So I would see that while many boards could be involved, the public safety committee could be perhaps one that could be more on the implementation side and be considered. And it includes the police chief, DPW director, and the fire chief are all on the public safety. And, that would seem to be a public safety thing. We encountered this when all the pipes froze in whatever that was, the second week of February, and we lost power, to half the town or a third of the town. So I actually set up the heating center in town hall kind of on an emergency basis. And we had issues. The generator failed at Woodhaven. So there's lots of things that come to bear on it. And also, we don't have a good way. We do have reverse 911. Matt asked that too. We do have reverse 911 capability. So we can do that, but it only goes to people who've registered for it. I think there's some people who have opted out, so I'm not sure it goes to everyone. And what we found in the heat emergency, because people didn't have power, many people lost their Wi-Fi because their routers went out. So we couldn't, even if we had contact information people, we couldn't contact them. So it definitely needs to be addressed from a heat and a cold standpoint, I think. So, but I think, you know, with your expertise on the Board of Health, though, including, you know, clinical expertise, we could maybe provide some advice to the Public Safety Committee. And then, of course, the Select Board would be involved as well, as I envision, in terms of looking at delegating authority, maybe to the town administrator, and also funding resources. So that's just some thoughts, offhand thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And this is the Traffic Safety Committee was passed and subsumed into the. I'm just trying. We've had. This is the this is the all-in-one version, right?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. I'm not sure if we've completely sunsetted traffic safety, but when Brad Van Brunt moved out of town and he was chair, it pretty much stopped meeting. So the intent is that, and we had the public safety look, we had some complaints about traffic on Coolidge Street. So the intent is that public safety will deal, I know Matt helped me with that, communicating with the neighbors. So I think the Public Safety Committee has the expertise, and including the retired fire chief from Needham is the chair of Public Safety Committee. Not Needham, Newton. Newton's public head of their fire department moved to Sherborn when he retired. So we have some talent there that could, you know, marshal resources. Regional issues are good ideas, I think, in a lot of these things, just like we have the regional dispatch center now. So,
and
I got Becca Rausch asking me to meet with her once every other month. So maybe we, submit an earmark request to our state representatives.
Can I ask a question, Jeff? Because
Sure.
I'm like the newest person here. So, to your knowledge, the Public Safety Committee really hasn't needed to look at heat waves. Is that correct?
I don't know if I would say they haven't needed to. I don't think it's come to the forefront. But you know, Pine Hill, I think, as you said, it is unique, and it's the only school building that doesn't have air conditioning, and maybe it's the only public building in town too. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure it is.
You know better than I, because they only moved some of the children to the library, because I thought there were some classrooms that are air conditioned with like window units or something at Pine Hill.
So in the building, there are 22 classrooms, and in addition, 22 classrooms in total. And in addition to that are specialist rooms, counselors' rooms, there's a few other rooms, so over 22 rooms, and 5 in total have air conditioning. And they're, I can speak saying that I've substitute taught in those rooms because I started teaching during the pandemic to help them out. And you know, when it's warm, it depends on how warm and how humid it is. They're older units. They're certainly not something I would invest my money in, but you know, they can mitigate the heat. But like or is it 2 weeks ago now, whenever that was, you know, it was that combination of high heat and high humidity that just made it so, you know, an older, less efficient machine like that could not keep up. And I talked to the teachers and some parents afterwards as well. And they did a great job trying to be creative. I think what I heard was, in reality, particularly the 5th graders ended up back in their classrooms. And I did talk to the school nurse who said she had numerous kids coming down feeling quite sick as a result of it. So, I mean, it's definitely a huge concern in that building.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could even be things like changing the school schedule. You know, if you go to Georgia, they get out of school in like early May and they start in mid-August or something. So maybe we have, I'm not sure that would help you because it might still be hot in August, but it could be not only facilities issues, but policy issues.
That would be so hard to do without it being statewide, just
No,
because of the
no, well, I
domino
know, but
impacts of.
there may be state people, looking at that. I don't know, but I mean, the buses aren't air conditioned. Also, you want to dismiss them early, you're going to put them on an unair conditioned bus. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, the buses aren't air conditioned either. I mean, it's definitely an issue. And I agree with you, Daryl. I mean, I think the pattern is the frequency, severity, and duration of these events is increasing, so that what has been marginal seasons like May and June and September, which have historically been absolutely gorgeous, my favorite times of year, we're seeing these heat waves during those months as well. And there's no reason to expect that to change. So I, respectively, Jack, I don't think we can dodge it.
No, I'm not saying we should dodge it. So we'll just
Yeah, the trouble becomes if you move on one end, you get caught on the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will second what Julie said. I was in Pine Hill. They had some portable chillers they were trying to use in the larger spaces, and it was mitigating at best. It was still pretty horrible in there. So it's they're not long-term solutions for sure. I think the other thing I'll comment is, having interacted a little bit with public safety through the sort of issues Jeff mentioned on Coolidge. My experience was that it's a pretty responsive group, and I think would sort of be open to implementing things. It may be worth, if anybody from here can become a semi-regular attendee at that, it might be useful. As I recall, it was sort of a tough time slot that they usually meet. But Jeff, do you remember when the meetings usually are?
Well, I think that meeting was
ad hoc
time for the Coolidge Street thing. I don't think that was. I'm not sure if they what their regular meeting time is, but it as you saw constitutes most of the public safety town employees, including the 3 department heads. So we could cause the meetings to be at a more appropriate time too. And just make people more aware. I think the Board of Health having this on your agenda tonight was smart, because it just increases awareness also, so that we have a sustainability corner, and maybe we need an energy coordinator or something like that, and maybe we can get some grants that way. I don't know the answer to all of that, but the library, we actually saved an enormous amount of money. We're getting money back from Eversource because there's 22 air source heat pumps in the new library. So we did it with much greater energy efficiency also.
22. I didn't expect that number. I knew there were source heat pumps. I did not expect you to say 22.
Well, they go to 4 condenser units that are on Sanger Street, but in the ceiling, that big 150 person room in the basement has 3 alone.
Oh wow!
So it's just because of distribution within the building, but they're way more energy efficient than older systems that you described at the school. So
yeah, exactly. I use them in my own home, Jeff. I think highly of them. They're incredible.
Yeah.
And I will say, to the money point, because we also passed this or created a climate action plan. It was late spring or something like that. And part of that is identifying. I'm sorry, there's an incredibly loud cricket apparently in the room with me. I don't know if you can hear that right now. It's not an owl, Daryl. It's not an owl. But so within that, opens us up to the pool of MVP grants, some of which are pretty substantial size grants. And so at least for the school, it's been identified as potential avenues for funding. They're competitive grants, so they're not guaranteed. But particularly for the school, I think the more money we can get to help, the better. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for including me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Hopefully we'll be able to be part of getting this ball rolling.
Well, I'll continue to I'm very good at poking my nose into things, as some of you may know already. And I'll continue to try to follow up and attend a public safety committee meeting just to kind of hear what they're looking at. But particularly with, I'll follow with the school as well. And I will also follow up with the COA, because that's, the school we're starting to get a handle on, but I really feel like we don't really quite know how our seniors are doing. So that's the part I really would like to understand better too.
That may actually transition us to our last topic, which is agenda items, because I would like to sort of plan on hearing about this again after you meet with the COA.
Sounds great.
What was that?
I would also like to add the issue of, well, we have to start getting ready to meet with the ZBA regarding at least the Farm Road project, I believe, is on, and there's another one I get blanking already. But anyway, apparently at the meeting that they had that overlapped with our prior meeting, and also they're having another meeting that overlaps with our October 4th meeting. So we won't be attending those, but apparently they've already started discussing the water supply issues, including the issue of whether the water supply at least the Farm Road project should be PWS, regulated by Mass DEP, or a series of private wells shared by a number of units. So that's an issue I'd like us to go through what some of the pros and cons are. The board has looked at this issue for a number of other projects, multi-unit projects that's come before it. So that's a big topic. And we have to do it soon because they're moving ahead. I've asked whether things could be held off so that we're not backtracking or we're not falling behind on what the discussions are by virtue of not being able to attend the meeting. It's not clear those discussions won't happen. I could imagine, I'll probably, now that I've just learned that it was discussed at their prior meeting already, I'll be looking for that recording of that meeting to see what was said exactly in the meeting.
So I think, Jeff, I see your hand up, but I want to make sure that we don't get too deep into discussion, because I think the main point here is that we need to spend time discussing at the next meeting.
Yeah, this is just a real quick update because Sean texted me. The Board of Health has a member of public safety as a designee of the Board of Health. You may not have designated someone, but the Public Safety Committee has a spot for a Board of Health designee, and the Pine Hill School principal is on the Public Safety Committee.
So it sounds like the committee has been reconfigured because we were not included in the last version of the Public Safety Committee.
Well, let's just look further into it, but I just Sean made some good points that those two, if they're not active members, have the ability to be, it sounds like. But I can look into it. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So
Patrick, right. We just need to have enough time, and maybe we divide up that discussion into a few things because I think our next meeting is kind of busy.
Were you talking about the agenda items?
Yeah.
So what do we have on book for October 4th?
Yeah, the next meeting, October 4th, don't forget, it starts at 6 o'clock because you'll be doing the regulation review from 6 o'clock. And right now there's nothing at 7. If you open the meeting right at 6, you can start your public hearing for the regulation review and go straight until 7:30. When there's a variance hearing. There's another variance hearing at 7:50. And then there's a couple items that I don't even remember what they were, but earlier tonight you said you want them on the next agenda. So there's a couple more items that'll be added, at least.
Yeah, I think so. I think the items to add are an update on the heritage.
Oh, yeah.
I think an update on sort of Julie's discussions with COA. And then discussion of sort of public versus private wells and how we best interact with ZBA since we keep having conflicting meetings.
Yeah, and
Anything else?
earlier earlier today, I did send Rick Novak the Board of Health schedule of meeting dates. So hopefully that'll work out.
Anything else at this point for anyone else on the board?
Nope.
Well, hopefully we'll have time to get through a number of regulatory reviews. With that nice big block, we can hopefully move that forward.
I think I remember where we left off. I hope I bookmarked it.
I have it.
Do you, Ellen? Thank you.
I'll let you know.
Thank you. My post-it might have come unstick by now.
All right. Anything else for tonight?
I think for the next agenda, the only other thing I could think of that might end up being on there, depending on how their schedule goes, is something about the pump testing of the Laurel Field well, if that got installed or not.
Yeah, I have not heard, Daryl, if they have, but I may take a look out there tomorrow to see if there's any activity.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Right.
With that, I think we've covered our current agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have one other agenda item because, sorry, it's another. And speaking with the town administrator earlier today about our item on Woodhaven Leland, which was confusing to others. He said, well, why don't you use the generic agenda item that covers correspondence, which is apparently what the select board does. And then they just review things at the end. And as long as it's something that doesn't require deliberation, that's the guidelines that they've had. But in the past, we've been instructed to always be very clear about what we're going to discuss and not have like a general catch-all kind of a thing. So I'll talk more to him about it. I relayed that to him, the direction we had before, and then the option he was offering, which does sound easier, but we just have to figure that out. So that might be on next time. And would the board be this board even be interested in having that kind of a catch-all? For
maybe
just,
if it was near.
That can become dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. But because we don't have to abuse it, but we could use it when we receive things like this, which are interesting and worthy of knowing.
Right, since this seemed to concern people, that we would be informing ourselves about or discussing a little bit, just noting receipt of things and how it applies to us, but not making any decisions regarding it.
I mean,
So,
alternatively, we could, there might be a way to more clearly convey that that's what we're doing. So maybe we don't have a catch-all correspondence, but we have correspondence, and then we list the items we received under it, much like we did today, to make it clear that like it's just to note receipt.
Yeah. Okay. I like that, given what Ellen said about the pitfalls of the other.
Can I ask a clarification question on the 4th of October, the hearing? Is that was an additional meeting that we voted to include? Is that just to discuss regulations, or are we also having a regular meeting afterward? After the regulatory discussion?
we had a regular meeting booked for 7 p.m. there on that date, and we voted to start an hour early.
Okay, so that the regulatory session is just at 7. It will just proceed to the normal agenda. Just wanted to make sure that I was interpreting correctly. That's what I thought, but I just want to make sure I wasn't.
Yes, but if we could choose to spend the first part of that agenda continuing the regulatory review if we so wish, because we don't have any appointments until 7:30. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
All right. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Second. So moved. I'm sorry. Wrong order.
Second.
Hearing no
You guys, good job.
Thanks. Hearing no further discussion, Matt Beavers, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.